Hey everyone. Let's talk about something we all experience, that feeling of wanting. Wanting something to be different. Wanting something we don't have. Maybe it's something big, like a major life change, a different career, a deeper sense of peace. Or maybe it's something smaller, like wanting that nagging headache to just go away. We spend so much of our lives chasing after things, hoping they'll finally make us happy, finally give us that sense of okayness we're all searching for. But how often does it actually work out that way? How often do we get exactly what we want, and then feel completely satisfied, for good? I've spent many years studying the teachings of the Buddha, and one of the things that always struck me was his incredibly insightful, and, honestly, kind of surprising, take on this whole problem of wanting and not getting what we want. It's not what you might expect. We tend to think of desire as the problem, right? Like, if we just stopped wanting things, we'd be happy. But the Buddha actually saw a different kind of desire, a deeper longing, as the key to unlocking real, lasting happiness. It's not about suppressing desire, it's about transforming it. I remember years ago, before I became a monk, I was obsessed with, mention a specific, relatable goal, e.g., getting a promotion, finding the perfect partner, achieving a certain level of financial security. I worked so hard, I stressed myself out, and even when I got close, it never felt quite enough. There was always this underlying feeling of what's next, or is this it? It wasn't until I started exploring Buddhist principles that I began to understand why I felt that way, and, more importantly, how to find a different kind of fulfillment, a satisfaction that wasn't dependent on external things. So, in this video, we're going to dive into the Buddha's wisdom on this. We're going to explore why we often feel like we're not getting what we want, even when we achieve our goals. And, most importantly, we'll learn how to use the Buddha's teachings to cultivate a kind of wanting that actually leads to genuine peace and happiness, a happiness that isn't fragile, that doesn't disappear the moment things change. By the end of our time together, you'll have a completely new perspective on desire, suffering, and the path to a truly fulfilling life. It's a journey, for sure, but it's one that's open to all of us. So, let's get started. Okay, so the Buddha's teachings start with something called dukkha. Now, that's a Pali word, and it's often translated as suffering, but it's really much broader than just, physical pain or intense sadness. Think of dukkha as more like a fundamental unsatisfactoriness that's woven into the fabric of life. It's that feeling that things are never quite perfect, never quite complete. It's the fact that everything changes, good times don't last forever, we get older, we get sick, we lose people we love. It's not about being pessimistic, it's about being realistic. The Buddha was just pointing out a basic truth about the human condition. Life, as we ordinarily experience it, is inherently imperfect and impermanent. And that imperfection, that constant change, is a major source of our dissatisfaction. Now, here's where it gets interesting. One of the core aspects of dukkha, the Buddha said, is this feeling of not getting what you want. But he wasn't talking about, like, not getting the latest iPhone or not getting a parking spot right in front of the store. He was talking about something much deeper. He said, those who are subject to birth don't want to be subject to birth. And he went on from there, we don't want to age, we don't want to get sick, we don't want to die, we don't want to experience sorrow and loss. These are fundamental human aversions. But, and this is crucial, the Buddha said, this is not to be gained simply by wishing. We can't just wish away aging, illness, and death. We can't just wish away all the things that cause us pain and dissatisfaction. That's just not how reality works. So, if wishing doesn't work, what does? This is where the Buddha introduced the idea of skillful desire, sometimes called Chanda in Pali. And this is where things get really counterintuitive, because we're so used to thinking of all desire as bad. The Buddha wasn't saying we should try to become emotionless robots with no desires at all. He was saying that there's a difference between unskillful desires, the ones that lead to more suffering, and skillful desires, the ones that actually lead us out of suffering. That deep longing, that aversion to aging, illness, and death, that's not a bad thing. In fact, the Buddha saw it as essential. It's the engine that drives us to seek a solution, to find a way out of this cycle of unsatisfactoriness. Think of it like this: imagine you're in a house that's on fire. Your desire to escape the fire, to get to safety, that's not a bad desire, is it? It's the most rational, most important desire you could possibly have in that situation. The Buddha saw our situation in a similar way. We're trapped in this cycle of dukkha, and the skillful desire to be free from that cycle is what motivates us to find the exit, to find the path to liberation. Of course, it takes more than burning with that desire. You have to know where the exit is. Let's move on to find the door. So, we've established that this deep desire to be free from the unsatisfactoriness of life, that's our starting point. It's the fuel, the motivation. But, as we said, just wanting it isn't enough. We need a map, a method, a practical way to actually achieve that liberation. And that's where the Buddha's Eightfold Path comes in. Now, don't let the name intimidate you. It sounds fancy, but it's really just a set of 8 interconnected guidelines for living a wiser, more ethical, and more mindful life, a life that, step by step, leads us out of suffering and toward genuine, lasting peace. I'm not going to go into all 8 factors in excruciating detail right now, we'll touch on them later. But think of the Eightfold Path as a holistic framework. It's like a recipe with 8 ingredients, and you need all of them to get the desired result. One of the key things you need to start this journey, the Buddha said, is conviction. Sometimes this is translated as faith, but it's not blind faith. It's more like confident trust. Trust in the path, trust in the process, trust that this actually works. Think about it: if you're really sick, and a doctor gives you a prescription, you need to trust that the medicine will help you, right? You need to have enough confidence in the doctor and the treatment to actually take the medicine, to follow the instructions. Otherwise, what's the point? Conviction, in the Buddhist sense, is similar. It's that inner sense of, okay, I see the problem, this fundamental unsatisfactoriness of life. And I see this path, this Eightfold Path, as a credible solution. I'm willing to give it a try. I'm willing to put in the effort. But where does this conviction come from? It's not something you can just magically conjure up. It's not about forcing yourself to believe something you don't really understand. The Buddha said that conviction arises naturally from a deep understanding of dukkha, that fundamental unsatisfactoriness we talked about earlier. The more clearly you see the problem, the more motivated you are to find a solution. And when you see a potential solution, a path that seems credible, that resonates with you, that's when conviction starts to blossom. It's like, the more you feel the heat of that burning house, the more determined you are to find the exit. And when you finally see a door marked exit, you don't just stand there and say, I wonder if that's really a way out. You run for it. That's conviction in action. The Buddha described this really beautiful cycle of progress. He said that suffering, that deep awareness of dukkha, leads to conviction in the path. And that conviction, that willingness to practice, leads to joy, a genuine sense of well-being that arises from living a more mindful, ethical, and wise life. And that joy, that inner peace, becomes the foundation for deeper concentration. We'll talk about meditation in a bit. And that concentration allows you to develop discernment, the ability to see things clearly, to understand the true nature of reality. And that discernment, ultimately, leads to release, liberation from suffering. So, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? Suffering, which we usually try to avoid at all costs, actually becomes the seed of our liberation. It's the starting point of this incredible journey. But in order to truly follow the path, we need to understand what the path consists of. So, we've got this eightfold path, this roadmap to liberation. And, as I mentioned, it's often summarized into 3 key areas of training. Think of them as 3 interconnected pillars that support the whole structure. These are called virtue, concentration, and wisdom. Let's start with virtue. This is all about ethical conduct, about living in a way that minimizes harm to ourselves and others. It's about making conscious choices that are aligned with kindness, compassion, and honesty. Now, this isn't about following a rigid set of rules just for the sake of it. It's about understanding that our actions have consequences. When we act unethically, when we lie, steal, cheat, harm others, we create suffering, not just for others, but for ourselves as well. We create inner turmoil, guilt, and regret. The Buddha gave some basic guidelines, often called the 5 precepts, things like abstaining from killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and intoxication. But it's not just about avoiding these things, it's about actively cultivating their opposites: kindness, generosity, truthfulness, respect, and clarity of mind. And here's the crucial link: living ethically requires mindfulness. You have to be aware of your thoughts, your words, and your actions. You have to be present enough to notice when you're about to act in a way that's harmful, and then make a conscious choice to do something different. For example, instead of reacting with anger and lashing out, to make a choice of being patient and understanding. Next, we have concentration. This is where meditation comes in. The purpose of meditation isn't to empty your mind of all thoughts, that's pretty much impossible. It's about training your mind to be more focused, more stable, more present. Think of your mind like a wild horse, constantly running around, getting distracted by every little thing. Meditation is like gently, patiently training that horse to become calm and responsive to your guidance. One of the most common and powerful meditation techniques is focusing on the breath. Just sitting quietly, paying attention to the sensation of the breath as it comes in and goes out. Not judging your thoughts, not getting carried away by them, but simply returning your attention, again and again, to the breath. The Buddha emphasized feeling the breath throughout the entire body. Not just in your nose or chest, but everywhere. Can you feel the subtle expansion and contraction with each breath? Can you sense the connection between the breath and your entire physical being? This helps to anchor you in the present moment and develop a deep sense of inner stillness. Don't just go through the motions, be with the breath fully. Finally, we have wisdom. This is the deepest level of training. It's about seeing things as they truly are, not as we want them to be or think they should be. Wisdom, in the Buddhist sense, is about understanding the 3 marks of existence: anicca, impermanence, everything changes; dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, that inherent imperfection we talked about earlier; and anatta, not self. There's no permanent, unchanging self or soul. Now, this isn't just intellectual understanding. You can read about these concepts in a book, but that's not the same as experiencing them directly, seeing them in your own life. That's where concentration comes in. When your mind is calm and focused, you can start to observe the workings of your mind and body with much greater clarity. You can see how thoughts and emotions arise and pass away, how everything is constantly in flux, how there's no solid, permanent I at the center of it all. The Buddha talked about fabrication, sankhara, how we construct our experience through our thoughts, perceptions, and intentions. The Eightfold Path, virtue, concentration, and wisdom, is a skillful fabrication, the best fabrication, because it leads us to deconstruct the unskillful fabrications that cause us suffering. Also, having penetrative insight isn't just watching things arise and pass away. It also is about seeing, where are they leading you? What kind of actions will they inspire in you? Are they skillful or unskillful? And keep in mind, these three, virtue, concentration, and wisdom, they're not separate, isolated practices. They're interconnected. They support each other. Living ethically makes it easier to calm your mind in meditation. And a calm, focused mind makes it easier to develop wisdom. And wisdom, in turn, reinforces your ethical conduct. It is one package. So, we've been exploring this path, this journey towards liberation. And we started with that key idea, skillful desire. Remember? That deep longing to be free from the unsatisfactoriness of life, from aging, illness, death, and all the other forms of dukkha. It's important to remember that this initial desire, this yearning for something more, something beyond the ordinary cycle of suffering, is not the problem. It's the engine that gets us started. It's what motivates us to seek a solution, to embark on this path of practice. Now, the Buddha talked about a specific kind of feeling that's actually helpful on this path. It's called renunciate distress. That might sound a bit negative, but it's not. It's a kind of positive discomfort. It's the feeling you get when you realize, hey, there are people who have actually achieved this liberation, this awakening that the Buddha talked about. And I'm not there yet. It's a sense of healthy urgency, a gentle nudge that says, keep going. Keep practicing. There's something real to be attained here. It's not about comparing yourself to others in a competitive way. It's about recognizing the possibility of freedom and feeling inspired to pursue it. It's like seeing someone who's successfully climbed a mountain and thinking, if they can do it, maybe I can too. There's this great story in the Buddhist texts about a monk named Ananda, who was one of the Buddha's closest disciples. One day, Ananda was talking to a Brahmin, a kind of priest, and the Brahmin asked him, "What's the goal of this path you're practicing?" And Ananda said, "One of the goals is to put an end to desire." Now, the Brahmin was confused. He said, "But how can you use desire to get rid of desire? Isn't that like trying to put out a fire with fire? It's an endless path." And Ananda gave this brilliant answer. He said, "Before you came to this park today, did you have the desire to come here?" The Brahmin said, "Well, yes." "And now that you're here," Ananda asked, "do you still have that desire?" "No," the Brahmin replied, "because I've already arrived." Ananda said, "It's the same with the path. You use desire, that skillful desire to be free from suffering, to get yourself to a place where you don't need desire anymore. It's a tool, a raft that you use to cross the river, and once you're on the other side, you don't need to carry the raft around with you anymore." This highlights a really important point. The Buddha's teachings are all about cause and effect. You can't just wish your way to enlightenment. You can't just want it really, really badly and expect it to magically happen. You have to cultivate the causes of liberation. You have to put in the effort to practice the Eightfold Path, to develop virtue, concentration, and wisdom. It's like planting a seed. You can't just want the seed to grow into a beautiful flower. You have to water it, give it sunlight, provide the right conditions. And as you progress on the path, as you develop these qualities, something really profound starts to happen. You start to develop right view. That's one of the factors of the Eightfold Path. Right view is seeing things as they truly are, impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. Right view helps you to see the drawbacks of clinging, of grasping, of holding on to things that are inherently changing and impermanent. You start to see that all the things you thought would make you happy, material possessions, sensual pleasures, even your own sense of self, are ultimately not reliable sources of lasting satisfaction. Right view basically encourages you to dismantle things you see as valuable to understand what truly is valuable. It is a value judgment. And here's the amazing thing, right view eventually points back to itself. It tells you to let go of everything, even your attachment to right view. Because even that is a fabrication, a mental construct. It's a tool, and once you've used the tool to achieve its purpose, you can put it down. So, the ultimate goal is not to suppress desire, but to transform it, to refine it, and ultimately to transcend it. It's about letting go of all clinging, all grasping, and finding a freedom that's beyond any kind of wanting or not wanting. First you let go of the things that aren't on the path, and finally, you let go of the path itself. I know that is a lot. Let's recap and bring all this home. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Let's recap the core message, the heart of what the Buddha was teaching about getting what we really want. First, that feeling of not getting what we want, that deep dissatisfaction with life, that's not the enemy. It's actually the starting point. It's the seed of skillful desire, the desire to be free from suffering. Second, wishing alone doesn't work. We need a practical path, a method, and that's the Eightfold Path, which we can think of as those three interconnected trainings: virtue, concentration, and wisdom. Third, it's not about suppressing all desire. It's about transforming it, refining it, using it skillfully to get to a place where we're no longer driven by clinging and grasping, where we can finally let go and find true peace. So, how do we actually do this? How do we put these teachings into practice in our daily lives? Here are a few practical tips to get you started. Tip 1. Start small with meditation. Don't feel like you have to meditate for an hour a day right away. Even 5 minutes of just sitting quietly, focusing on your breath, can make a huge difference. There are tons of guided meditations online if you need some help getting started. Tip 2. Cultivate mindfulness in daily life. This is about paying attention to your thoughts, your words, and your actions as they're happening. Notice when you're feeling stressed, angry, or frustrated. Notice the intentions behind your actions. Are you acting out of kindness and compassion, or out of greed, anger, or delusion? Try to bring this awareness into everyday activities: washing dishes, walking, eating. Just be present with whatever you're doing. Tip 3. Reflect on suffering and liberation. Take some time each day, even just a few minutes, to reflect on the nature of dukkha, that inherent unsatisfactoriness of life. And also reflect on the possibility of liberation, of finding a way out of that cycle. This helps to strengthen your conviction, your motivation to practice. Tip 4. Find support, sangha. This path can be challenging, and it's really helpful to have support. See if there's a local meditation group or Buddhist center near you. Or connect with others online who are interested in these teachings. Having a community can make a big difference. Tip 5. Study the teachings. Learn a little more, find a teacher you can look up to. Having the guidance and community can keep fuel in your fire. There are so many wonderful resources available: books, websites, podcasts, videos. Explore the Buddha's teachings and see how they resonate with you. Remember, this is a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs. There will be times when you feel discouraged, when you feel like you're not making any progress. That's perfectly normal. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Just keep coming back to the practice, again and again. Trust the process. Trust the path. Even small steps, taken consistently, can lead to profound transformation. So, as we come to the end of our time together, I want to leave you with this thought: the Buddha's path isn't about escaping life. It's not about running away from difficulties or trying to become someone completely different. It's about embracing life, fully, with all its ups and downs, with all its joys and sorrows. It's about learning to be present with whatever arises, without clinging to the pleasant and pushing away the unpleasant. It's about cultivating wisdom and compassion, not just for others, but for ourselves as well. This path is about finding true freedom, not the freedom to get whatever we want, but the freedom from being controlled by our wants and aversions. It's about discovering a deep, unshakable peace that's not dependent on external circumstances, a peace that comes from within. I truly hope that something we've explored today has resonated with you, has sparked something within you. If it has, I encourage you to explore these teachings further. There's a whole world of wisdom and practice waiting to be discovered. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking it, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with others who might benefit. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. I'd love to hear from you. And finally, I'd like to offer a simple blessing, a wish for your well-being. May you find peace on your journey. May you cultivate wisdom and compassion. May you live a life of meaning and purpose.